Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. I'm just going to cover two things in this latest tepid jam, including this headline from the Crypto Basic. Ripple CTO shares email that led to his entry in Ripple. And folks, I thought this would make for a fun little Sunday night video because this is something that I don't think has ever been seen before. I'm not aware of him ever having shared this in the past, but David Schwartz shares information that, had this not happened, XRP itself wouldn't exist, or it's certainly not in the form that it is in today. And then also I have an update on a part of a story that I was covering just the other day. In case you hadn't heard, Kim Jong-Gensler, he went from just saying, well, I'm not going to comment on the status of any individual coin, to then stating that his personal belief is that Bitcoin's not a security, but not going to comment on the status of any individual coin, even though he already did with Bitcoin. He went from that to this, with this being that he now is stating his position that everything that's not Bitcoin is a security, and thus falls under the jurisdiction of the SEC. Everything's illegal. I kid you not. And this was a story that broke in New York Magazine, and I'll just note to you, 1.7 million followers on Twitter, widely circulated. Everybody in crypto has been talking about this. Well, there's this headline from Cointelegraph titled, "Crypto Lawyers Flame Gensler Over Claims That All Crypto Are Securities." And so I'm going to share with you perspective from a few different attorneys in the world of crypto on this. And let's just say that nobody agrees with Gensler. It's like almost zero humans on the planet, at least outside of the SEC, thinks that he's making a damn bit of sense. Oh, and also I wanted to mention this as well. It's tough, defending Gensler's position if you're Gensler. But it's also tough if you're anyone else, like a Bitcoin maximalist. And I'll just tell you this: I'm gonna show you how Bitcoin maximalism. I mean, it just, my opinion, like, it just makes people look stupid. Especially when Bitcoin maximalism, just in a general sense, leads to people saying stuff about, the security status of cryptocurrencies, and they end up siding with Gensler without knowing what they're talking about, or they're just lying. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so into this first piece here, because XRP, frankly, would not exist had this not happened, at least not in the form that it exists in. And I'm sure that many of you are aware that Jed McCaleb, one of the founders of Ripple, is the guy that kind of had this idea of a new form of Bitcoin, so that's kind of where it started. And David Schwartz is obviously a major player in the development of XRP. But check this out. Here's some interesting history. I've never seen this before, having been in the XRP community over half a decade, so I found it endlessly fascinating. But check this out. According to a shot shared by Schwartz, say that 3 times fast, the application email was directed to Jed McCaleb, co-founder of Ripple. David Schwartz, Chief Technology Officer at Ripple, recently shared the email exchange between him and Ripple co-founder Jed McCaleb that ultimately landed him his job at Ripple. The conversation shares more insight into the early days of the American technology company. And by the way, so this is dated September 17th, 2011. So this is a piece of history at this point, frankly. And it's so interesting to see how he characterized himself as part of the, member of the Bitcoin community. At this point, the toxic maximalists out there, they would not like to hear this. they would not like this fact, and they would just despise this in general. But I find it very cool and very fascinating. And so anyway, here's an email that David Schwartz shared on Twitter from himself to Jed McCaleb, September 17th, 2011. And I'll just remind you, it wasn't until early June, it might have been June 2nd, I want to say, it was definitely 2012, that XRP was actually created, like where it was first coded. And when it was first coded, and you can see it on GitHub, it was actually called XNS, and then it was later renamed to XRP. But so this is well before it was actually created, and then it wasn't launched until roughly another half year after it was technically created in June of 2012. So anyway, David Schwartz emailed Jed McCaleb, and he said, "I found you on Stack Overflow. You can find my profile at," and then he provided a link. I'm interested in the lead software engineer position. I currently have the highest reputation on Bitcoin's Stack Overflow site. I'm also an active participant in the Bitcoin forums and a respected member of the Bitcoin community. Whew, folks, I'm telling you. I bet most Bitcoin maxis out there who don't like XRP at all, even if they're aware of them, they probably have no idea that that is true. David Schwartz is one of the earliest Bitcoin developers, right up his alley, obviously, and he always had a fondness for Bitcoin, but he recognized very early on a number of the shortcomings and thought that there was a way to do things better. And he was right, as evidenced by the adoption of XRP. And fine, Bitcoin's still the most well-known and adopted cryptocurrency in terms of, even if you just talk about speculation, fine. But from a technological perspective, come on. XRP is obviously the best cryptocurrency on the entire damn planet when it comes to payments, just broadly speaking. That's for sure. It just works, folks. Try using Layer 1 Bitcoin to pay for anything. Not exactly a user-friendly or fun experience. It's costly, too. Anyway, and then David Schwartz wrote, I've been working on a Bitcoin successor myself, after seeing what has worked well and what has not worked well. You can find some of my public writings on this subject at these locations. And then he shared some links. And then he says, I think I'm an exceptionally good fit because of my specialized knowledge in cryptocurrencies and my decades of C++ development experience. Sincerely, David Schwartz. And look at how early it was. Like back then, he typed, because there was no right way, because cryptocurrency wasn't even technically a word at that point. It wasn't in a dictionary. He wrote crypto-currencies. That's how early it is. Now nobody does that. I just think it's kind of an interesting note. Not that it matters one way or another. It just kind of find it fascinating. It's just kind of like a sign of how early days this was, you know. And then Jed McCaleb responded. And we can see the email here at the bottom, and this is pretty much the end of it. But Jed McCaleb did respond and wrote, Hi, David. Yes, I've seen your posts on the forum. Your resume looks perfect for the job. We'd like to meet you to talk about it more. Do you ever come over to the Bay Area? And folks, as they say, the rest is history. Although history, of course, unfortunately, continues to develop, not always in positive ways, which is the perfect segue to the next story. Again, in the headline from Cointelegraph, crypto lawyers flame Gensler over claims that all crypto are securities. Cryptocurrency lawyers have rebuffed comments made by the head of the United States securities regulator, excuse me, who claimed in a recent interview that every cryptocurrency except Bitcoin is a security that falls under its jurisdiction. In a wide-ranging February 23rd New York Magazine interview discussing crypto, Securities and Exchange Commission Chair Gary Gensler claimed, quote, everything other than Bitcoin, end quote, falls under the agency's remit. He added other crypto projects, quote, are securities because there's a group in the middle and the public is anticipating profits based on that group, end quote, which he said is not the case with Bitcoin. So again, as I stated in that last video, and I don't want to rehash everything that I said in that video because I just did my best to tear the damn concept to shreds and everything that he said. But obviously, the only reason that he's saying this about Bitcoin is because he doesn't know who to sue. He doesn't know who made it. I mean, yeah, in theory, you could go after miners and this and that, but he doesn't know who made it. And it's so widely adopted, maybe he's just like, that one might be too hard. So apparently the path forward, if you want to create a cryptocurrency, is just don't get caught as the creator, and then it's not a security. There you go. You got the roadmap right there. Good job, Kim Jong-Gensler. But it's just it's so laughable. I mean, because look, if you've been following the case as long as I have, and I assume that probably most of you are at this point, you're pretty well informed of what's going on here. The typical person who's not a lawyer doesn't know the things that we know about securities law. And I'm not pretending to be a lawyer. I just play one on the YouTubes. I know. I'm not pretending to be. But I know more than I ever thought I would about securities laws. And so the average person doesn't understand that Kim Jong-Gensler is flagrantly lying. And in terms of what he's stating is important when it comes to these considerations in that interview even, it's a bunch of bogus nonsense. And so it's laughable here. But the good news is, attorneys who are following this, and you would expect them to know, or at least have some sort of idea, even if they're not securities attorneys, they're chiming in, and they're not really buying what he's selling here. Now, that shouldn't be surprising at all, which is just another thing that makes me think when this is all said and done, history is going to show that we're on the right side here. So there's an attorney named Alexander Grieve who wrote, Gensler in New York Magazine on crypto. And then he's got 3 bullet points. Number 1, everything is a security except Bitcoin. 2, every company out there is in violation. 3, crypto is pointless, but blockchain is kind of neat. And then he says, hard to argue you're acting in good faith if admittedly trying to stamp out an entire industry. It's so obvious who is falling for this. Because he's not even talking about having a test for every single crypto anymore. He's not talking about applying the Howey test. He just says they all are. There's over 20,000 damn cryptocurrencies on the existence. He didn't even analyze all of them, but he says they are. He's trying to destroy this. And attorney Alexander Grievier is like, yeah, obviously, hard to argue you're operating in good faith when that's what you're doing. True words, my friends. Then there's attorney Jake Chervinsky. And he tweeted, Chair Gensler may have prejudged that every digital asset aside from Bitcoin is a security, but his opinion is not the law. The SEC lacks authority to regulate any of them until and unless it proves its case in court. For each asset, every single one, individually, one at a time. So folks, that's a very fair point, and I am glad that is indeed true. I know that's true. You probably knew that was true as well. But it doesn't change the fact that this has a freezing effect over the entire industry because people don't know if they're the next to get attacked by Kim Jong-Gensler. They don't know. It's absolutely having a material negative financial impact on people, not just in the United States, but actually it's rippled out throughout the world, frankly. And certainly at a minimum in terms of price action, that's bad enough. But in terms of entrepreneurialism and adoption and what would have been occurring and developed here in the United States, there's some of it, but almost none. It's almost all outside of the United States here. And so, fair enough point from Chervinsky. I'm not pushing back and say, I agree that Kim Jong-Gensler is going to have to make that argument again and again and again. But if they do get a win, in any sort of material way, say there's even a new test, in terms of what determines what would be security when it comes to cryptocurrencies, which is possible, by the way, and I'll expand upon that in a second because another lawyer brought that up. If that happens, well, everything's dead anyway. So again, not that I think that is what is likely to occur, but I'm just thinking out loud here, and I'm not the only one that's talking about this stuff. And then there was also attorney Logan Bollinger, who shared the following. Friendly reminder that Gensler's opinions on what is or isn't a security are not legally dispositive. In this country, judges, not SEC chairs, ultimately determine what the law means and how it applies. Doesn't mean his thoughts are irrelevant, they're just not dispositive. Which is to say, the SEC can bring enforcement actions and get settlements, but those aren't legal precedent. Companies/individuals can choose to go to trial, where SEC would have to prove to a judge that something was a security, if that's an element of the allegation. The federal court then decides, yeah, we agree with you, SEC, these are securities, or no, SEC, we don't agree with you that these are securities. The Howey test itself is judge-made law. An SEC chair didn't make that up. Judges interpreted the Securities Act and the definition of an investment contract under the Act. Now, folks, and I'll just pause to note, I made a video that happened to be talking about this within the last few days or so, because there is a fun debate going on. I love fun debates about whether or not there could ever be a Ripple test, and my position is, of course there could, and I don't want to rehash that whole video either, but there are a number of reasons for that. But one of the things I did point out is that the Howey test became law because of the decision in the Supreme Court case, and so I did end up ultimately pointing out that should the SEC v. Ripple case make it to the Supreme Court, which I hope doesn't happen, I don't think it's likely, but I acknowledge it absolutely could happen. Well, if there's some sort of determination there, then of course there would be a Ripple test there. And it's not like the Howey test was called the Howey test in that case anyway. In the the W.J. Howey case, the SEC against them. It just was informally known as that after the fact. In fact, there was never 4 prongs literally written out. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. They described what should be considered, and then people counted the things that they said was important, and that informally became known as the Howey test. Well, that could become known as the a Ripple test if it's if it should get to that point. And then he also pointed out that it doesn't mean that the Howey test is going to be around here forever. So check this out. Attorney Logan Bollinger also wrote, important to keep in mind that, in theory, Howey test could also be subsequently overruled. Alternatively, the Securities Act of 1933 could be amended. New laws could get written, etc. Yeah, and so, folks, the most obvious example of that is what happened with the Roe v. Wade case. And I'm not making a political commentary on that one way or the other. I have no interest in that. I'm just pointing out that was as a result of the Supreme Court overruling. Stuff like that can happen. So it doesn't mean that Howey test is here forever. It doesn't mean that there can't be a subsequent test that could be applied in addition to this that's more crypto specific. All of those things could happen. And then this attorney also writes, but Gensler saying, I think XYZ are securities does not legally mean that they are, in fact, securities. And so they're certainly not to this point. And as it stands today, XRP is not a security, and that's not just opinion. It's not been declared a security. It would have to actually be declared a security, which I don't think is going to happen, but we'll see. And then, oh my God, Bitcoin maxis. Oh my God, the bane of my existence. Why are these real humans? I don't get it. Why did nature make these humans? It has to be some sort of mistake. I can't explain it any other way. So you got Max Kaiser here. How many people follow? 509,000 followers. This guy's a piece of work. So he shared this, and he wrote, Gensler is right. Everything not Bitcoin is a security. Okay. Quoting Gensler, and he's a guy that's all about smaller government, this and that. Oh yeah, except for when it suits him and his heavy Bitcoin bags, apparently. Isn't that convenient? And so Attorney Deaton wrote, when you quote Gensler, you immediately lose the argument. The underlying tokens are not securities per se. Any asset can be packaged, marketed, offered, and sold as a security. It's the circumstances surrounding the offer and sale of an asset that triggers U.S. securities laws. So, folks, Max Kaiser could be ignorant or he could be lying. Either way, it's bad, and he's spewing this nonsense out on Twitter to over 500,000 people. Yay! Thanks, Max Kaiser, for absolutely nothing and your ideological rigidness based on your financial fortune. That's just the best. You gotta love it. Right? No, except no. So toxic Bitcoin maximalism is certainly gross, and it makes people look stupid no matter what. But if you've been following and learning about securities laws as a result of the Ripple case, you know just how stupid what he said is there. And that's what he's putting out into the world. My gosh. He's going to be on the wrong side of history, though. I'll tell you that. That's my belief. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.